Anyone who has listened to me talk about Platinum Games knows that they are one of my favorite companies at the moment. The 78th Element's unique take on the action genre and their ability to mix up gameplay elements bring them to the top of the developer pile. And yes, I just made a periodic table reference. Science, people. Science. But can Platinum Games keep it up? Remember, they've got two major projects they're currently working on in Scalebound and Star Fox Zero. Will Transformers get the Legend of Korra treatment, though, where it doesn't live up to the company's past history of quality releases? Or can it transform and roll out into a must-buy title for those Transformer fans out there? Let's find out. The game brings us back to the older generation of Transformers. Basically, it takes Michael Bay's reimagined monstrosities and throws them out the window. And thank God for that, because one of the biggest strengths the game has is its nostalgic factor it brings to the table. The cel-shaded style brings the Autobots and Decepticons to life. It does help that having the original voice actors play Optimus Prime, Megatron, and pretty much everyone under the sun. It definitely enhances the experience to a point where it just feels like a Saturday morning cartoon.
Will you never learn, Megatron? Annihilation of an inhabited planet is not what our ancestors wanted. How little you really know. Hey! You autobots go no further!
The plot is dumb. You should expect it to be dumb, though. It's written like the old style. There's a core called the Pharaohtaxis. It's going to destroy the planet, but Megatron, of course, wants to use it to rebuild Cybertron. So Autobots want to get it before the Earth goes kaput, and in comical fashion, the Decepticons always grab it at the last second while the Autobots are dealing with something else. By the end of the game, you're wondering how the Earth is still actually alive with all the times they just sort of let things happen. This is a good thing, though, because, well, it's exactly what the old show was, and it captures it quite brilliantly. But it also has Platinum's style to it. The presentation has those unique elements, the introduction of characters and the text associated with them. It feels cinematic without forcing it, letting it play to a visual appeal without taking the controller out of the player's hands at times. The music in particular stands out in this element, as it has an upbeat yet somehow classy element to it. Those who have played Bayonetta 2 before will feel a familiarity with the melee combat here. It's just a dumbed down version of it. It's basically if the combat from Bayonetta 2 was on training wheels. The combos are pretty basic with light and heavy attacks, but a combo can be ended with a vehicle attack. This attack has you transform into your vehicle and knock into your opponent. What's weird here though is that you don't actually have to do the entire combo in order to do this. You can just sort of flail around in the air for a little bit and then have the homing attack of the vehicle actually hit the opponent. The focus mode element of combat returns from Platinum Games. Basically, it slows down time when dodging out of the way of an attack at the last second. It's rather necessary at harder difficulties due to the amount of opponents you'll be dealing with at one time. You do also have a unique ability that you can use based on the Autobot you are playing as, from Optimus Prime to Wheeljack. They range from attacks from dodging under the enemy to get behind them to actually doing a little bit of damage. Some are a lot more useful than others, that's for sure. Now your character does have stats as well that grow as you grow in the game, in RPG fashion. It just feels so disconnected from the rest of the game, however. I wouldn't have noticed it if it didn't say I leveled up on the screen. Now there is gunplay here, and I found it to work to a certain extent, but maybe not as well as I originally hoped. The different weaponry in the game ranges from shotguns to homing missiles. There aren't necessarily a lot of required range battles, but it can be a good mix-up to the melee combat. You'll get some of the iconic weaponry of the show as well. Now what I found is that the gun did a better chance of isolating an enemy and getting rid of it quickly, or to keep the damage going in between combos. When going to aim, you immediately target an enemy, which I found weird considering that's an easy shot or two that can be gotten in. Now look, I think it works as a secondary mechanic in my opinion, but melee combat still is the bread and butter here. I do think though that there was a specific design reason to keep the pace up in combat. And that's what the game does well. Sure, there are moments where you have to move through the game through corridors that cause breaks in the action, but going from enemy to enemy or mission to mission feels like a smooth flow. In the element of combat, enemies felt like they fought as a team at times, and you had to deal with them systematically. Going from one enemy to the next felt so easy to do, and it doesn't feel clunky like in some other action games. And that's without a lock-on system as well. It's a good, responsive combat system at its core. Where the game also shines is when you're in your transformed mode. This was something that could have easily been a gimmick, but it turns into one of the strongest elements of the game. There's reasons to transform into your alternate mode during combat. Working up speed to hit an enemy can knock them into the air for more damage or break through a shield. And in particular, I really enjoyed the chase fights, where you are following a Decepticon and attempting to catch up with him, stop him, beat the crap out of him as he attempts to take off and run from the fight. The easy transition to your other mode is what makes this. It feels like a natural changeover and feels like it fits into the combat rather well. Even with the game's combat being Bayonetta light, this helped define it to be a little bit different in the end. So you're listening to me right now and probably thinking, okay, another Platinum's game classic at this point, right? Don't roll out just yet, because there are problems with the game. And the major problem? Variety. See, the combat here has a couple of basic tricks, but enemy variety wears out rather quickly. Sure, the game introduces some new elements along the way in some bigger enemies and whatnot, but about halfway through the game, you've seen all the game is going to show you basically. And that's a problem when the game relies on its combat so much. Not to say that it doesn't innovate at times. There are certain battles that change the game up for the sake of variety that do the job. But again, that only does it to a certain extent. Sooner or later, you'll be facing the same enemies without anything new added to it, and it's a lot sooner than you'd hope. Even the environments see reuse and get to be the same after a while, especially in the later half of the game. Unfortunately, there are clear signs that this isn't the kind of work that we've seen from Platinum in the past. And it leads me to think the connection with Activision is somewhat the cause. See, the game's last half of the campaign feels like someone hit the fast forward button on the remote. In games like Bayonetta 2 and Vanquish, the story felt like it was fleshed out and worked from the beginning to end in a coherent and paced manner. Here the signs are clear that the content hit the cutting room floor. New animations coming out of nowhere in the last half that felt like they should have been there the entire time. Story elements that immediately drop off the face of the earth after a very slow build-up. This product was rushed. Reused boss fights with no new mechanics in it. Luckily, it doesn't show the signs like other rushed products do, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 being the prime example. But the signs are there. It seems this game was released before it was truly ready, or cut a lot of content in order to make it to market in time. I can't help but wonder what the game could have been if it was truly given the 5-star treatment and waited for the full version to come out. And let's talk a little bit about the weaponry and item management for a second. Now you have a bit of options to customize your character. You got 4 main weapon slots, which one must be a melee weapon. Depending on your Autobot, you'll also have equipment you can put on in terms of a sort of an armor per se. Each of these items have certain rankings and abilities. With the weaponry, you can synthesize them to make more powerful weapons and all, in one of the most confusing interfaces known to man. I'm serious, I'm not sure who came up with this, but it's really hard to tell who's got what equipped and what's usable and not at times. I felt the interface as a whole needed a lot more work on that side. It made this feature that it could have been interesting feel micromanaging in the wrong kind of ways. Sure, you can customize your character, but it's also not really required in the end. And that's what leads to what I think is my major gripe with Transformers Devastation. Platinum is known for weaving everything together, from side missions to main missions to alternate mechanics into one big package. The way they did it in prior games was seamless. It didn't feel like a patchwork quilt, for example, but more of a blanket. It felt like one coherent piece. But that's not the case in Devastation. Between the level system that feels so disconnected from the main action, to the storyline that almost forgot about what was happening at the start of the game, it feels like that Devastation is the patchwork quilt. And that sucks. It loses the polish that I love about Platinum games, and it's what ultimately drags the game down even if it has the fun factor to it. Look, I had a great time with Transformers Devastation, don't get me wrong. Even with all that I see is wrong with the game, it's a good time at its core. but forgive me when I say that the game isn't flawless. In fact, it feels un-Platinum-like in several elements. I can't help but feel that Activision again is to blame here. This is considering Platinum's history with several other publishers and the games that they've put out being fantastic and polished. There's holes here, in particular with variety and longevity. Even with the challenge modes, for example, they feel just like rehashes of the story mode. The game is short, and even the extra content feels like it's just tacked on. That the content was stretched out to get all it could get out of it for those small resources. While the core game is fun, it's not something you have to run out and get right now. You've played it before in another form most likely. Sure, Transformers fans, they'll be loving every second of it. It brings the final score of the game of 80 out of 100, meaning it's a solid title to pick up, but if you're really hurting for funds, you can wait for a little bit. But as always, that does not include my enhancer system that gets to the specifics of who will like the game and who doesn't. Let's take a look at the enhancers. Add 10 if you're a classic Transformers fan. Look, it's got the feel of the old show for sure. Those who grew up with these cartoons as being a big part of their Saturday mornings, yes, this is exactly what you'd want out of a licensed game like this. Like mentioned before, Platinum captured the look and feel pretty well here. If you were to play it as an episode on TV now, you'd think they would have rebooted the series for the modern audience, and in that case, it does it rather well. Take off 3 points if you're a Bayonetta 2 fan. Now hear me out. You'll be able to deal with this somewhat, but it's too fresh off the Game of the Year last year. With the changes made to the combat here, it feels like it's handcuffed in what it wants to do, maybe to appeal to a larger crowd. If you're looking for the technical combat that Bayonetta 2 has, it doesn't exist here. It unfortunately will make the game feel a little bit more empty, even with the newer mechanics they add, which do reduce the negative enhancer here, but overall, you'll still feel a little bit of a hole in what you're playing. Take off 3 points if you're expecting a strong storyline. This comes into play because of the second half of the game, where the game's rushing to its conclusion. The intrigue that builds up with Nova Prime, for example, is great, except nothing's ever really done with it. It honestly makes me wonder if this was the planned ending. But yeah, if you're expecting the greatest of stories here that will pay off in the end, you're mistaken. Now, it's still low on the enhancer scale because of the feel and the look here, but overall, it's not a strong story, even for a Transformers story. Once again, this is Dragnix signing out, and I want to thank you for watching this video. If you like this content, do what Optimus Prime would do. Like the video and share it with a friend. If you want more content like this during the week, hit that subscribe button and help me make a career out of this. And like always, leave your comments below so I can take it, use it, and grow it as a content creator. Thanks for watching, and remember that every game, regardless of what you see on screen, is more than meets the eye. Topical, I know. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you like this content and want to see more of it, you may want to hit that subscribe button on the left-hand side. If you like this video and want to see more of this content, take a look at this video on the left-hand side as well. And if you missed my last video, take a look at the right-hand side. Once again, thanks for watching, and keep on gaming.